watching the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. The role of auditors is increasingly under the scanner. In the last few days, the Ministry of Corporate Affairs has moved court asking for a 5-year ban against Deloitte Haskins & Sells and KPMG affiliate BSR&Co. The RBI, meanwhile, recently banned EY member firm SR Bartley for a year from auditing the books of commercial banks. Meanwhile, Pricewaterhouse&Co is in the news for resigning as auditor of Reliance Capital and Reliance Home Finance. In fact, more and more auditors are choosing to resign from their role instead of facing the heat. In light of scams like IL&FS and huge divergences in bad loans that commercial banks have been reporting, the finger of suspicion has pointed towards the role of auditors, especially the Big Four. So what are the implications for auditing firms? Is the action demanded against auditors justified? Have unscrupulous methods indeed been used? And if the Big Four feel the heat, will it be an advantage for homegrown firms and other smaller ones? To answer some of these questions and look at the entire situation in a comprehensive manner, I'm joined today by Amarjeet Chopra, former president of ICAI, R. Narayan Swamy, professor of finance and accounting, IIM Bangalore, and J.N. Gupta, former executive director at SEBI. Welcome to all of you and thank you for speaking with us today. Mr. Chopra, let me begin by asking you how you see the situation currently unfolding. Would it be a stretch to say that auditors are seriously in trouble? Of course, some say it's about time that their role is looked at in more detail.
You see, Tamanna, in the last 10 years, I think auditors have been under some kind of a pressure ever since Satyam happened, and now, of course, even after Satyam, there have been many other things, but now IL&FS seems to be the last straw on the camel's back. Somewhere or the other, basically, I personally feel that we need to start looking at we have to do a lot of self-introspection so far as the auditing profession is concerned. There is no doubt about it. But at the same time, I would like to say one thing very clearly, that it's only unfortunately auditors who are getting the flack. There are absolutely corporate governance issues. The directors are there, the managements are there, the promoters are there, the rating agencies are there, the valuers are there, the RBI itself as a regulator has been there, the SEBI as a regulator has been there. I think we need to get into the role of each one of them rather than only looking at the role of the auditors. I am not denying that there are cases where the auditors have been under stress or strain. There is no doubt about it, and probably auditors definitely need to do a lot of self-introspection. But at the same time, I think the other regulators and the corporate governance issues, particularly the role of the audit committees, need to be looked into.
Mr. Gupta, I want you to come in here. Do you agree? Though Mr. Chopra is not saying that they're being made a scapegoat, but he's saying why the focus only on auditors? There's clearly a problem in the whole system. If now we are finding out that there is misreporting to some extent in so many companies' balance sheets, and the auditors seem to be the low-hanging fruit that are being targeted.
Good evening, Mr. Chopra. I would, to a large extent, agree with Mr. Chopra,
yes,
because auditors are only one part of the chain, but probably the most important part of the chain for two reasons. One, they are the first stage of protectors for the stakeholders. Secondly, there is no second guessing of audit report. So their role is a bit more important. However, I would say that when something fails, you cannot put a blame on one element alone. The issue is this, that in IL&FS, why it has happened, and if you look at the history of IL&FS and if you look at all those disclosures which people are using with the microscope now, you would find that there was a very clear indication that something is wrong. I will give you a very simple example, and Mr. Chopra says the corporate governance. Now, our IL&FS had a risk committee. Risk committee met only once in 5 years. Who was chairman of risk committee? Mr. R.C. Bhargava was chairman of risk committee. Whereas Mr. Bhargava as a risk committee chairman in Maruti met every year religiously. In IL&FS there was no meeting. So where is the good governance practice coming from the independent director from one board to another. Similarly, case with SB Mathur, Jaitit Rao and everybody. So it was a failure of directors level as well. Secondly, look at the shareholders level. Now, when the right issue was made, the three major shareholders did not subscribe. So I would say the signals were there inherently. Then the biggest blame has to go to RBI. As Mr. Chopra said, the regulators are also to be blamed. In this case, biggest blame has to go to RBI, because if you go by newspaper report, RBI found something wrong in the inspection report, but what did they do after that? That is where, if you find a patient and you leave the patient to cure himself, that's a very funny situation. Then I will come to say that yes, auditors have been having a very good time till now, because there was no one to question, there was no transparency. Now with the transparency coming and with the responsibility being put on to them, it is manifested in many resignation, very cautious statement and all other things, and it is a very good thing for future. Having said that, I would say that if we go and say that because of one mistake in ILFS or a couple of mistakes in ILFS, you ban Deloitte and you ban BSR, then for some problem in bank you ban SRBC, then what is happening is this: you are going to take, and PwC already under ban, so you are going to take a major portion of audit professionals from the audit field. That is one. The second important thing is this, that if you find in a organization, say for example in judiciary, if you find one judge has been on the wrong side, or if you find in a police, one police person on the wrong side, you don't disband the organization. So you got to penalize the person concerned severely, penalize the organization monetarily heavily, but you cannot reduce the number of auditors available. Then what is going to happen? The quality of audit in future. So you got to be very, very careful when you take such action. Yes, action must be taken. It should be exemplary action, so that tomorrow somebody should not be able to repeat it. But it has to be action which can be sustained, which can be explained, and which is not going to cause much more problem than what already is.
No, but Mr. Gupta, I'm sorry, I want to come back to you for a follow-up. If you're saying exemplary action should be taken, then why not the demand for a ban for 5 years? Can you really, in the current system, pinpoint individuals?
I will give you one simple example. Suppose in your channel, one of the news reporter had done some wrong reporting or something very bad. Will you close down the channel? What will happen to all the employees which have been working sincerely? So the action will be ban that particular person, penalize heavily in monetary terms the channel, but you cannot penalize everybody.
Okay, R. Narayan Swamy, I want you to come in on this. It's an interesting example that J.N. Gupta draws, because with auditors, it's not as if this is the only case where they're drawing flack, and it's not that auditors in the big four, if you're talking about them, are drawing flack only in India. So it is a bigger issue, isn't it?
Very much so. Thanks for inviting me. First of all, I want to say my views are personal. And second is, I want to say also that this is not exactly a good time for the auditors. Usually auditors are backroom boys and girls, and they are never heard of. So if they come to the fore, it actually means that something is wrong. So I think they are being talked about here for all the wrong reasons. I agree with you that auditors have come under scrutiny in other countries too. I am familiar with auditing related scandals in the UK, US, Japan, Korea, many other countries in recent years. So it seems to be a worldwide problem. So what we need to do is to find out if something is fundamentally wrong with the way auditing is done, the audit profession is managed and governed. I would also like to say that I would not like to make any observations on ILFS, although I understand the context is ILFS and other related issues. The reason being the matter has been investigated and charge sheet has been filed. It's too premature to make any observations. So although we use ILFS as a context, which I fully agree with, I think we should not, I would not like to make any observations on that specifically. Now, what I would like to say is that I think public expectations from auditing are very high. So people think that the auditor is there to go and do things because they can't do those things themselves. In fact, that is how auditing started. Shareholders couldn't go and check what the directors were doing, so the auditors were appointed. Now, if the auditors say that we can't be expected to do all that you want us to do, then they have to say what they can do and what they can't do. So the shareholders and other stakeholders in financial reporting understand what they can reasonably expect from auditors, and that's, I think, something which is missing here. Now, coming specifically to what might have gone wrong in some of these recent cases, what I certainly believe is that there has been audit failure in a number of cases, and I use this in my classes all the time. If you look at an Indian auditor's report, actually if you have seen one report, you have seen them all. So I tell my class in a joking way, actually only in a half joking way, all that the auditors in India need to do is to take the soft copy of an audit report, do Control F and change the date and change the company's name. Then you have a new auditor's report and for a new company. So virtually it's boilerplate language. You don't really learn anything about what might have happened to the company. And also they introduced this internal financial controls report with a lot of fanfare after the 2013 Act. That again is a boilerplate. So I am deeply disappointed with the way auditors' reports are prepared and given to the shareholders. So shareholders, I think, are entirely justified in feeling let down by the auditors. This is one. The second is another major important constituent in the financial reporting process. You have regulators, you have the tax department, you have the government. You ask any of them, in fact I do this my own dipstick survey all the time, you generally get the sense that people are unhappy with what the services they are getting from the auditors. So I think auditors are drawing flag to an extent somewhat unfairly, but I don't think it's fully unjustified. I certainly think that a lot of criticism is justified.
Okay, I want and I'm going to open up this debate, so please indicate if you want to come in on a certain point, but I'm going to go to Mr. Chopra as a response to the points that the professor made, that they're boilerplate models being used by auditors. They're not doing enough.
Can I come in before Mr. Chopra?
Let me say one thing, Tamanna, that there's absolutely no doubt on one point. There is no doubt on one point. So far as I'm concerned, that I think the SA 240, which talks of frauds, basically the auditor's responsibilities with regard to detection of frauds, I think when I was doing my BCom or graduation at that particular point of time, we used to hear the Kingston Cotton Mills case that auditor is only a watchdog, he is not a bloodhound. I think all those concepts have to undergo a change, and even SA 240 has to be rewritten internationally, to my mind, because what Mr. Narayan Swamy also said, it is not peculiar to India, it is now it is happening all over the world. You talk of US, you talk of UK, you talk of Japan, you talk of Korea, you talk of Singapore. The frauds have happened everywhere, the scams have happened everywhere, and we cannot keep on taking the shelter of a particular standard saying that it is not auditor's responsibility to detect the frauds, it is only his responsibility. The moment he stumbles upon some information which is fraudulent in nature, then only will come into play. I think what Mr. Narayan Swamy said makes a lot of sense in one way, that our auditors' reports have to undergo a change in a manner that these start throwing some kind of indicators. And I can tell you at least one part of the report is already being tried to be modified, sought to be modified, which is CARO. And some of the indications might come in the periods to come. But today, the way the things have happened internationally, I am using that word, it is not only in India. Mr. Narayan Swamy said that the reports in India can be, the auditors only change the top page of it. I can tell you that you look at the reports which have happened internationally, I think only the top page is changing if that is happening in India. There are reports even in India where auditors have qualified the reports, there is absolutely no doubt in my mind. Of course, the regulatory mechanism in certain years has been fallible, I don't deny that, but in certain years it has been very good also, and we definitely need to look at it again what more can be done and how the audit reports can be made more meaningful, and how this SA 240 or how the management representation standards, which is at most of the times the auditors say that we are looking into the management representation and we are basing our observations based upon the management representation. That standard itself is very clear that the hypothesis of the management has to be tested. You just can't take it on the face value. So I think we are following international practices. Internationally, some practices have to undergo a change. It is not peculiar to India alone.
Okay, now Mr. Gupta wanted to come in with comments. Mr. Gupta, come in quickly before I take the debate forward. Yes, Mr. Gupta.
Yeah, I wanted to say one more thing, that it is not only the auditor's report. If you see the director's report, they are all cosmetic reports done by a professional cosmetician.
Yeah.
For the simple reason, if you read ILFS director's report of 2018, word risk has been used 86 times. Now they have used word risk 86 times, but they have not bothered what about the risk, what was there. That is one. Having said that, I would say I agree with Mr. Chopra to a large extent. The reason is the entire audit process has to go a metamorphosis. For one reason, because today the audit process is still followed based on what has been happening historically. It doesn't take into account the changes that have happened. The second is the disclosures have to change, because most of the times the corporates, with the pressure that they have done, the disclosures have disappeared from the balance sheet and annual report. Third, I would say that there has to be a tabular format where what has been the management representation and what is the auditor comment on each and every management representation, that there will be transparency. And third, what is the scope of audit should be defined very clearly. And I would say again, I would agree with Mr. Narayan Swamy that audit professional at risk is not only in India, it is a global phenomena, and that has to be settled, and maybe the word over standards need to change.
But let's look at the fallout and what we have seen. I wouldn't say fallout, but the kind of reaction we've seen with Price Waterhouse. We've seen right now, pulling back from Reliance Capital, etc. We've seen auditors pulling back from firms like Manpasand Beverages or Vakrangi. We've seen a slew of these issues in the last few days and months. And part of the reason is the increased scrutiny of the auditor's role. So let me come back to Professor Narayan Swamy to ask that then, are auditors well within their rights to say that if you are going to be so stringent with me, the moment I see some signs of trouble, I will withdraw? Why should I put my neck on the line?
I think auditing is a matter of contract between the audit firm and the client. So parties to the contract can walk out if the other counterparty to the contract does not keep his word. I think that is well understood. Nevertheless, in cases like these, we would expect the auditor to tell us what exactly went wrong. So, for example, if you look at some of the cases, I don't want to name them, where the auditors resigned without giving any reasons. For example, the typical reason I find is we are preoccupied with something else. Then suddenly we also find the auditor's health has deteriorated. So how suddenly all these things can happen? Preoccupation, they didn't know that they would have these commitments, they did not know about the health. So those kinds of vague excuses I think are not acceptable. Nevertheless, in the context of the example you mentioned about Reliance Capital, I think the explanation given by the auditor is very detailed, and in fact I really admire the auditors for coming up with such a detailed explanation letter and telling us exactly what went wrong. Now this is exactly what I am saying. I want to see stuff like this in the auditor's report. So if we get this kind of stuff, we know what is happening. Now obviously Reliance Capital will have its own story, but then we know the auditor's version of what has happened. Now a couple of things I want to add about why things might have come to this pass. Now one of the things that has happened in India over the years is that the Big Four have acquired a lot of companies, so there has been a lot of concentration. Now, very surprisingly, the smaller firms in India were the ones lobbying for auditor rotation. I am doing some research on auditor rotation, and I have found something very anomalous. Now, after rotation, the share of the Big Four put together is a lot more than it used to be before rotation was introduced. So smaller firms actually have fewer clients and even a lesser share of fee than before. So rotation doesn't seem to have helped us that much, and the big four have become bigger. So I think this is something to be addressed very carefully. Now the big four are able to get bigger and bigger because they provide a package of services to the client. So you have, let me make a classification in a very simple way. One is audit services, which is auditor's report, and the second is non-auditor services. Let us call this consulting for ease. Now over the years, consulting has become very important to them. When I say the big four, I don't mean only the big four firms, but also the bigger firms, non-big four Indian firms, for example firms like BDO and Mazars and so on, they all belong in this category. So they all are making a lot of money in consulting, hopefully not anything by doing anything wrong, but all I am saying, auditing is what we have engaged you for, licensed you for, that is what society thinks about you. Now you want to do things other than auditing, and you of course say in a very jaunty way, oh we also do auditing. Now that is something unacceptable to me. So I in fact want to propose solution. Maybe I am talking out of turn at this stage. Proposed solution. I think audit firms should be restricted to do their age old boring stuff, which is auditing. They should get paid for it. Non-audit services should be provided by others. I think if that split happens as a result of this, we would have learned something from this entire crisis of auditing.
That's an interesting thought, but how would you enforce it? That's an interesting thought, but
produce some good out of this.
But how would you enforce it, and would it be restrictive as a business practice? I'll come to that, but I want to talk about rotation and the presence of the big four in India, who have a bulk of the business, especially of listed companies. Amarjit Chopra, I just want to step up on that. Now, the big four would possibly, in this area, of grey, would want to keep themselves safe and withdraw. Does that A, lead to an opportunity for smaller firms, Indian firms? And what do you make of this suggestion which has come that let the auditors just audit, leave all the other advisory business to others?
You see, the point which has been raised by Professor Narayan Swamy is very, very valid on two counts. Number one, rotation actually came in to make sure that there is no concentration of audit and there is no longer duration of audits with one particular auditor. And it could help the medium-sized firms or the smaller firms in this particular country. But on the contrary, what has happened is that the big four clients have gone to big four only, but the clients which were being handled by mid-sized firm also have gone to big four for various reasons, because all those companies which were being provided funds from abroad by through any of the sources, those fund providers really laid down in certain conditions the conditions that you need to be audited by big four. That was also one of the reasons, and of course in certain cases the conditions were that the promoters themselves thought that probably for the sake of having the services from a bigger firm, they really went into the bigger four firm. So far as the audit versus non-audit is concerned, firms are concerned, let me say one thing on this, that we should be very clear that in India we have 74 to 75% of the firms which are absolutely small. Now, those smaller firms may be doing the tax consultancy also, or may be doing the tax audit also. Now, if at all you want to bring in this concept of pure audit, basically, I am absolutely for pure audit firms. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind. In that case, it should be made applicable to the bigger companies' auditors only, because if you really implement it in mufassil towns, I think 70% of the profession really is going to suffer. Okay. Or alternatively, what I am trying to suggest, and I have been saying it to all my professional colleagues for the last almost 15 to 20 years, let us consolidate. The smaller and the medium-sized firms, Indian firms, will have to consolidate. We should not be going after name, whose name it is, whose property it is. Basically, I think more important is that if we want to really raise our standards of auditing, if we want to raise the work, we will have to consolidate in the periods to come. And if we don't consolidate, I think the writing is on the wall for those mid-sized firms, for that matter.
Okay, very interesting points. Mr. Gupta, would you like to comment on some of the suggestions which have come here? Let auditors only audit, a consolidation among the smaller firms to come into the play. Though I think we also need to have a clear comment on the kind of action that the government is taking. Do you think it's too harsh? And what is the response of the auditors that have come in, especially the ones who say that I will not take the risk and I will withdraw or I will resign from post of auditor for XYZ company?
You have asked so many questions in one sentence, but I will go one by one. The first, I am very much in agreement with Mr. Chopra. The reason is that Big Four has a bouquet of services and they have got experience which ranges from, the people who have experience ranges from 2 years to 40 years or 45 years. Whereas if you go to individual auditor, you have either a 40-year experience or a 2-year experience. So only when those smaller firms get together and make a bigger firm, then only there will be prosperity for them in future. So singleton, they are not going to prosper. As Mr. Chopra rightly said, that because the most of the investors who are there, they insist that the audit firm should be of a repute. That is one. The second part is this: as far as the rotation is concerned, the idea of rotation was not to move business from Big Four to small or something. No, that was not the idea. Idea was that it was thought that over a period of time, if the auditor has been there since eternity, there's some sort of affinity developed and then the real audit work suffers. So in order to break that link, it was a rotation. And the second aspect of rotation was that earlier auditors used to be appointed on year-on-year basis. So the sword was hanging on the neck of auditor that if you don't do this through to the promoter, or if you don't follow the promoter or management, then next year you will not be appointed.
Yeah.
So in order to take that risk away from the auditor, the 5-year term was given. Now, as far as the action is concerned, the government is going on the right path. But I will say that path, the only one thing I would say, that banning the entire organization is not the solution. The second is that you got to look at it holistically. You got to pick up each and everyone who has been responsible. You can't pick up the weak link, or you can't pick up one auditor or a group of auditor. You got to take into account who were the employees concerned, who were the bankers involved, who were the audit committee, who were the board. Everybody involved should be done. You cannot take action against few people who have no support in the system.
Okay, absolutely. I'll have to end this fascinating debate here, but thank you so much to all of you for coming in with your views. If you've been wondering what's happening with the auditors and the scanner of the auditors, I hope you watched this show and found some solid analysis and inputs right here.